My next guest, Hilton Jones, a left below the knee amputee, defines the idea of perseverance. His journey, following an unfortunate accident, is truly inspiring and brings to light the idea that amputees can thrive. Hilton is an adaptive athlete who continues to lift up many lives that he touches. It is my pleasure to introduce Hilton Jones. Hilton, how you doing?
Good, Rick. Nice to see you.
Oh, it's great to see you too, my man. I'm so excited to have you here today. I know you and I both have been on a little bit of a journey in terms of connecting. I think I reached out to you quite a while back, and I so appreciate you hanging in there and wanting to participate in the podcast and share your story, which I personally find to be extraordinary, what you've been through and, all the different elements of just what has brought you here today. Being a high functioning amputee certainly doesn't happen overnight, as you're well aware. Mm-hmm. And, I really, really develop a lot of just intense curiosity about people like yourselves because, when I started my journey 6 years ago, so much of my inspiration and so much of my guidance came from trying to emulate people like yourself in my own little way, because all amputees are different and we all have a certain capacity in terms of our fitness level or what we can do, what we can't do. So coming to grips with that certainly is part of the process, but then to use people like yourself, like other adaptive athletes that really, really get people kind of supercharged, right? Because if I'm an amputee that's, let's say, wheelchair bound, and I just want so badly to walk across the room in my prosthesis, that's my goal. That's my goal right now. I'm going to walk, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When I can tap into the energy of a Hilton Jones, suddenly I find a way to do it because I see someone like yourself and I say, anything is possible. Anything is possible. Look what this man is doing. Look what he's capable of doing in a prosthesis. Anything is possible, right? I mean, how do you feel about that? I mean, the gravity of that influence that you have on people's lives, or is that just something you don't really even think about? You're just kind of like on your own personal journey. How do you feel about that?
I think it makes me very happy to hear because it was the same for me. I used Instagram, mainly Instagram actually, to find other people with the same kind of disability and then find out what was possible because there was nothing really around me that gave me any information about that. So it was really social media that let me know what I could do. So if I can help other people find that as well, then that makes me really happy.
And isn't that such a cool part of the journey when you think about it? Because there you were, you're swiping through Instagram, you're like, oh, look what this guy's doing. Oh, look what that guy's doing. And then, fast forward period of time, here you are today. And this is going to be heard by tons of people, tons of followers, and people are going to say, this is the kind of energy that I need to enhance my experience and to move forward in my life. I really appreciate you sharing so much detail because we've had some email conversations back and forth about your life and the beginnings of your journey. I so appreciate that you're willing to share all of that, which makes you a perfect fit for what we're doing with this podcast. I want to talk about your childhood and some of the struggles that you experienced as a young person growing up. And I think one of the things that struck me initially was that you were battling an eating disorder.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That is something that really puts you in a vulnerable space, let's call it, to be talking about that. Can you describe that to the audience? What that experience was like for you growing up?
I think the the main thing was that like it just seemed like such an easy way of losing weight to basically throw up everything that I'd eaten, because it was a comfort eating that I had a problem with, and so all of the problems seemed to feel a bit better with my favorite snacks or whatever, and then I'd feel guilty about that, and then it just seemed like the obvious answer, and then it just becomes part of your little like secret friend that helps you get through different days, feel better about yourself. But obviously incredibly unhealthy, and there's so many better ways of dealing with it. But
yeah, no, that's, it takes a lot of strength to be able to talk about it in that way, to sort of own it, as they say, like owning that experience and developing from it, becoming a better person, a healthier person from it. And I think when you talk about eating disorders, it's something that is very much, prevalent in the world. Certainly, very prevalent in the United States, specifically. When you look at a lot of the mortality rates, related to eating disorders, obesity, and then when you look at the psychological challenges that things like bulimia can create, to look at someone like yourself, given the space that you're in now, someone knows that there is a path out of that situation. And how would you say you came to grips with that, and then sort of change that part about you? Like, what was the catalyst that made you realize, like, I don't need this in my life?
Right. Yeah. It was a few different things at the same time. But I think the main thing that made me realize it was when I went traveling. I went to India, and I was quite young at the time, but I was very, very nervous about going. And I was on a very small budget as well. I didn't have so much money. And out of necessity, I couldn't eat very much. And a lot of the food that I had was very basic food. And my relationship to food changed because of necessity, I think. I realized the value of food and keeping it inside myself as well. And also I had this... I don't
want to be hungry anymore.
No, exactly. And then also in India as well, some of the places I was traveling, to be surrounded by people that really needed the food. And there was a kind of guilt about having the money to be able to eat and then throw it back up again to make myself feel better. And I think that kind of maybe it was a bit of a slap in the face, was like, okay, you have so few problems, like compared to some of the people that you're meeting. So I think it just put things in balance in some sort of way, the traveling itself.
Yeah. And to be experiencing, right in front of you in real time, that level of poverty, and people are literally, starving. I mean, they're struggling to feed themselves, and to know that nutrition, food, it's a gift.
Exactly.
It's truly a gift. And to squander that gift just to sort of comfort yourself, like you describe it, I would think would have been just that psychological journey of, oh my gosh, like, what am I doing? I mean, these, food is this essential part of who we are, and to sort of mess around with that. So no, I think it shows a tremendous amount of strength to be able to talk about that. And, as you went into your teen years, I mean, what was that like? I mean, were you the kind of person that was, indulging in the things that young people indulge in? Were you one of those people that was kind of out partying, doing that kind of stuff? I mean, what was that like?
It was a big shift as well. My father died when I was 17.
Oh, boy.
So
sorry.
a long time ago now, but thank you. He was very strict, and I had to be in the scholarship stream at school. I had to study Latin. I had to come in and do extra French on the holidays, and I wasn't allowed to do any sport. It was a very, very strict upbringing. So I think after he died, I went through a complete rebellion of doing everything that I wasn't allowed to do before. And I think that's kind of natural, but it went too far the other way, of course. And so a little bit with going out to raves and a little bit of experimenting with like party drugs and that sort of thing. Because I wanted oblivion. I didn't want to think about anything. I wasn't ready to deal with losing my father and then deciding what to do next with my life. So yes, that was a little bit of a crazy time. So that was another reason why I went to India, was to find a different direction.
Hey amputees, I'd like to take a moment to introduce everyone to the liner wand. We all know how bacteria and odor can be a major issue with prosthetic liners, and the liner wand is the solution. Did you know that if you're using soap and water, you may be making the problem worse? The liner wand uses a patented formula that deletes all bacteria and smells for 2 weeks. The liner wand is available as an affordable subscription or individually, and it always ships for free. To learn more, visit thelinerwand.com. That's TheLinerwand.com. Use code 211, that's 211, and receive 50% off your first subscription today. You can also use the code RICK, R-I-C-K, and receive 25% off your cleanser subscription as well. That's thelinerwand.com.
The reason why I went to India was to find a different direction.
Yeah, and when I think about, your childhood experience, going through those things, losing a parent at a young age, and then sort of trying to navigate it all. And, keeping in mind, we all mature at a different rate. I myself wasn't very mature when I was a younger guy. So being sort of susceptible to a lot of that stimulus, or, you're trying to sort of manage your feelings, about your dad, or conversely, is suddenly being given all of this new freedom because now you're sort of like, you're out of the cage, so to speak. And now it's time to, really live and to swing in that other direction too far, I would think is, like you said, a pretty natural thing. And, wanting to travel, I think is a big part of your story. You seem to have what I would describe as sort of this kind of explorer type disposition. You're this traveler, this person that wants to see other things, and always thinking about, well, what's my next place that I'm going to go, or how am I going to save the money in order to go to those places. And do you see the world sort of through that lens of, are you just one of those people that wants to have those experiences? What motivates you to say, well, I'm going to travel. Like I want to go to this place. Where does that come from, do you think?
I think there's maybe two parts to it, which is we moved a lot when I was young. So we didn't have one home. I was born in Scotland and I lived there until I was 5. And then we moved to England to about 3 or 4 different places as I was growing up. And so I never really felt like I really settled in one way. And also growing up, my mum was born in India, actually.
Okay.
And so there were a lot of Indian souvenirs and that sort of thing around the house. And my grandmother she could still speak Gujarati, I think. So yeah, there were a lot of influences that were pushing me towards India, I think. It was just without me really thinking about it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you saw it as like almost like part of your heritage,
Yeah, but I think I definitely had heard, the classic, oh, you have to go traveling to find yourself. And I was someone that definitely felt like I needed to find myself away from my family and away from everything else. And I think that was definitely the beginning of it. But then as soon as I started, I think that it became addictive in itself, the traveling. And it was such an amazing experience.
And I know so many people that live in that sort of spirit of adventure. You know, they can't really stay in one place too long. And they certainly have homes, you know, kind of like a home base kind of concept, but they have this need to venture, to get out and to see the world and to experience different culture and different, you know, food and, you know, really, really get a flavor for, you know, what's out there. And I really admire that. And, you know, transitioning to your accident, I think is probably what I want to talk about. I mean, you losing a limb and going through this rickshaw accident, pretty extraordinary situation. And if you're comfortable, I'd like to know in a little more detail, you know, how this happened, because, you know, so many of the amputees I talk to, you know, go through, you know, situations that are more kind of like developed through like circulatory issues, whereas, you know, you were involved, you know, in a very tragic kind of chance occurrence. So I'll let you kind of explain what happened to you.
Yeah, of course. So it was my second trip to India. I'd just been home and I decided I was going to be a travel photographer. That was my dream and my plan. So I bought all the gear, saved up some money, and it was right at the beginning of the journey. And I bumped into some friends from the UK actually, who were coincidentally in Delhi, and we traveled to Agra together. And it was very late in the middle of the night. We were in a tuk-tuk, like an auto rickshaw, so a motorcycle taxi, basically.
Oh, okay.
I was in the front with the driver, and my two friends were in the back with all the bags, the backpacks and everything. And we were driving around looking for a hotel, I believe, at the time. But maybe 2:00 in the morning, so hardly any traffic. But then this truck came from behind, very, very fast, and then just ran straight over us. And it never stopped. Somehow I went underneath the truck and it just kept going. And my friends, they stayed inside the rickshaw, and the driver also. But that was pretty crushed. So one friend, her glasses smashed in her eyes. I think she broke her nose, but she was pretty much intact. One other girl, she lost her big toe and the toe next to it, because the metal just crumbled and everything. But apart from that, she was okay. And actually, the driver came off probably worse of everyone because he lost his rickshaw, and he had maybe a story for another time. But yes, I got dragged along under the truck, and then eventually, I think my toes came off in the accident, and I was left in the middle of the road. But it was far enough that my friends had to flag down another car to come and pick me up, and then take me to the nearest hospital, which was a little bit of a shocking hospital, but it was the best that they had, the facilities. But
yeah, so what you're right. So you're getting dragged along. Are you conscious in that? Like, you know what's happening when you're going through the actual accident itself?
Right. I have more like flashes of it.
Okay.
I remember sounds and definitely almost like bumps, like almost like little flashes. But I mean, how accurate that memory is now is another thing. But I definitely remember being left in the middle of the road. I don't remember getting to the hospital, but I remember the doctor slapping me in the face, trying to get me to calm down because I was delirious and I didn't understand what had happened to me. So that was strange. In fact, actually, he kept slapping me in the face. I said, "Slap me in the face one more time, I'm going to slap you back." And I didn't realize my hand was completely broken. So it was like a wet fish probably across his face.
Yeah, right.
I think he tried not to laugh more than anything else.
Yeah.
But then I had an inkling that something was very wrong. But obviously the shock was so much, I wasn't aware of the pain or anything like that.
It's interesting what kicks in the human body when it goes through that type of trauma, because you were in this jarring, collision, which is certainly life-threatening. But it would appear, because I do talk to some some amputees that have gone through motorcycle accidents and lost a limb, and they will describe it in a similar way where they don't really remember, let's say in detail, sort of like what you're describing as they see flashes, but never really knew what had happened or the extent of their injuries until much later. And I don't know if and I'm sure we could have a medical professional explain to us, what the brain, what the body does when it goes through something like that. And I'm sure it has to do with our own defense systems, just to kind of protect us from, this horrible, oh my gosh, moment when things are happening in that regard. And you said the conditions of that, I know you got transferred at some point, but the conditions of that initial hospital, what was that like? Because I think you've sent me some photos.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And I kind of was shocked.
Yeah.
I mean, to be quite honest, I thought, oh no, this doesn't look good to me. So describe that.
I remember that as the doctors were walking around the operating table, I guess when they were doing the amputation, I remember this crunch of glass on the floor. So I think that was maybe the vials of morphine that they were just discarded on the floor afterwards and then walked over. There was, apparently there was dogs walking through the ward. It was definitely not
very sanitary.
Yeah, there was, but I mean, it was the best that they had for anyone. It wasn't anything that they were doing because I was a tourist or anything. It was the best they could do, and I was not really aware of too much about it. But yeah, when I look back on the photos, it's insane. Like there's blood from other people on the bed from previous operations and accidents, and when I left, they put my leg in like a brace because it was broken so much on the femur that I think it was like nearly 30 different places in the femur. So the brace was really important, but they didn't have money to let me keep the brace. So they had to take it off when they medically evacuated me.
Oh my gosh.
So I remember as soon as they took it off, my leg just flopped. It was,
So did they perform the amputation at that hospital? Was the actual amputation was performed there, or was that part of where you were transferred to?
As far as I know, it was after I was transferred the first amputation. So I think they put me in traction at that first hospital. Okay. And then I was put in a taxi to get me to Delhi. And I think it was just like a small van kind of taxi. I remember lying in the back of that. And again, I had gangrene and septicemia by then. So I was going in and out of consciousness. But I remember bits of that as well. But yeah, so it was when I got to Delhi, it was like a charity-run hospital, so the conditions were so much better. I think it was a Christian hospital or something like that. So much better funded, and it was much, much better.
Yeah, and when you think about it, given what you went through, given the circumstance that you were in, going to a facility like that, I mean, you have to play with the idea of some kind of divine intervention there. I mean, there's a very good chance that, you may have not made it.
Yeah.
Just given the care, the level of care that you were being provided, I can't think that you don't sit back and go, well, that was a kind of a tricky moment right there, that you were strong enough, and had your faculties enough to be transferred and then to be able to go through another procedure to essentially, in essence, save your life to a large degree, And have you had revisions since your amputation? Has there been a series of surgeries, or was it just pretty much what happened in that time?
So the first amputation, they did just around about the ankle, I think. and they found that the bone was too infected, so they had to do another one in India. And they were talking about they were going to do a third one, but they were going to, because they couldn't control the gangrene and septicemia, they were going to take the leg right up at the hip because of all the breaks that there were. They thought the best thing would be to amputate. So because my arm was also broken so many places, they were going to take my arm to the elbow, and they were going to take the 3 fingers from my right hand. So I would just have my thumb and my finger here.
Yeah.
So if I hadn't left the day I did from Delhi, they would have done that operation. So I was very aware of like how lucky I was and how much more difficult my life would have been to live if that had happened. And every time they did an amputation, they had to ask my permission. But every time they also said, if we don't do this, you're probably going to die. And it was such an easy decision to make. Yeah. So I think all the time I was very aware that I was lucky. And also that my friends were there to involve the embassy and get me basically back home. And they did one final amputation when I got back to the UK, so below the knee. Mm-hmm. And I think after 1 week, they managed to get rid of the gangrene and the septicemia, and everything was kind of under control again.
What an incredible medical journey. You know, when I think about your story, you know, so many of the odds were against you, and to see you now is just, you know, it's so inspiring. We're actually going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about what Hilton consequently did after his amputation, engaging a number of different things, high-level things, and then certainly what the future is on the horizon for him as well. We're going to do a segment we call Amps You Should Know, and we're going to be right back. Don't go away. On this episode of Amps You Should Know, I'd like to introduce everyone to Mac Nong. Mac is an LAK since birth. He's 29 years old. Mac is the program manager for Great Lakes Adaptive Sports Association. He oversees a range of sports activities for the disabled. I actually met Mac through a mutual friend, Robert Anthony, and we had just a fantastic conversation. And I so appreciate what Mac does with his life, dedicating himself to individuals with disabilities and exposing them to different activities, sports activities, things that allow them to live active lives and be their best selves. Mac is also a professional wheelchair basketball player. He represented the USA Amputee soccer team, and he also is participating in wheelchair football. You know, Mac is one of those rare individuals that is just so inspiring, because it would seem to me that his life mission is just to lift up others. I so appreciate that in him, especially given that he has been an amputee his entire life. He represents a very, very special part of the amputee community in terms of wisdom, in terms of guidance. I can't speak, highly enough about Mac and his mission statement as a human being. One of the causes, or I should say one of the major things that he has put his efforts behind, is he is one of the founders of the Fighting Illini Legacy Wheelchair Basketball Scholarship. So he just continues to give, and certainly at his young age has done so much for this community, and I'm so excited to see what he does in the future. Mac Nong is definitely an amp you should know. Hey everyone, we are back with Hilton Jones, left below the knee amputee, adaptive athlete, all-around fantastic person. I'm so happy to have him here today. We were talking about his medical journey before we took our break, and I want to get into some of the activities that you engaged, Hilton, that I consider to be somewhat transformative in your journey. We all have something that pushes us or is kind of like the game changer that gets us into like a new space as an amputee. Can you talk a little bit about what scuba diving sort of represented for you? Because it would appear to me that of the many things that you've done, that was something that kind of gave you that motivation or that momentum to sort of find your amputee space, let's call it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it was an accident that I fell into scuba diving. My friends were wanting to do their open water course while they were in Thailand. And I said, okay, I'll sit on the beach and I'll wait for you to come back and then we'll talk about how it went. The instructor said, yeah, but I've never taught anyone with one leg before. So if you want to, we can kind of experiment together and see how it works. And we'll give you a discount on the course. So I was really nervous, but of course I had to do it. So I did it with the one fin, and it was fine. I mean, a little bit of assistance getting in and out of the water, but it was no problem. In fact, you can gear up. You can put all the tank and the BCD and everything on in the water, so that it's very, very easy.
Yeah, and isn't there something really liberating about being in water in terms of the weightless aspect of it?
Exactly.
Because the time that I've been in a pool since being, becoming an amputee, and I, obviously there's all the gear with scuba diving. It's a technical discipline, but anytime that I've just, gotten in a pool as an amputee, I think, man, this is really nice. Like, I can do this, and it's so effortless, and it's just very, very freeing. Because, someone will say to me, what's an activity that I can do? And I'll say, go swimming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think almost scuba diving is even better because
I bet
the whole point is to get neutrally buoyant in the water, which kind of feels like being in space, like how you would imagine it to be being in space. So you're completely weightless. You can stay there for as long as you want. And all around you is everything like fish and coral and everything. Amazing colors, and it's completely overwhelming. Like the first time you go down, and I became so addicted to being underwater, and it lasted a very long time. That addiction, it was Now,
didn't that spin into a photography piece for you?
Exactly. So it started off as like open water advanced, and then I decided I wanted to become a rescue diver. So then I needed a prosthesis that I could basically adjust the foot. So I had like a key that I could turn, and I could lock the foot in one position or the other position, put a fin on it. So as a rescue diver, you need to be able to carry someone up the ladder if there's an accident on the dive boat, for example, or walk them up the beach. So then I had a diving leg, and then I thought, well, I've got a diving leg, so maybe I should continue the journey. And so then it becomes a dive master after rescue, and then scuba diving instructor after that. And one of the specialties is doing underwater video. So I loved that because I loved all the visuals of being underwater anyway. So then I wanted to be able to share that with other people. So the whole thing was very organic, the journey. But then I realized how much people really wanted to have the video of them learning to dive because it only happens once. So then that became a business in itself. And we would film people learning to dive on the dive boat and underwater, and with the turtles and the sharks and that sort of thing. We'd film them, we'd edit the thing on the dive boat on the way back, and we'd actually show it on the dive boat as well. And people would say if they wanted a DVD, they'd just order it from us, and we would deliver it to their hotels afterwards. So yeah, it was a fun little thing that we did.
It's awesome. I mean, it's so cool. And I would think the reactions that you would get, as a diver, and also as, an amputee, and you're sort of responsible for, creating this fantastic memory, for someone who's taking a tour. And I can only look at it through my own lens, when I had, 10 toes, is if I were to go on a trip and I'm like, this guy is like, he's an amputee diver. Like, this is the coolest thing, like I've ever seen. I would think some of those reactions would have been really neat, like for you, actually. I mean, what was some of that engagement like really fun for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we called the underwater video company Pirate Videos because, the pirate thing, I have a little earring and, the wooden leg nearly. So that was a little fun thing to play with. But
right.
every day on the boat, someone would be asking, oh, how did you lose your leg? How did this happen? And some days you'd tell the truth. Some days you'd make a little story.
Well, there are sharks out here,
Exactly. So I told this one girl, I said, it was, we were doing a dive. I was looking at a seahorse and suddenly like these sharks swarmed around my leg and they started attacking. And she said, but like, why didn't you just go straight up to the top? And I said, well, it was a really nice seahorse. And she believed me. So she said, well, how long did it take to lose the leg? 20, 30 minutes, but I got good footage.
Right.
So yeah, she was like, okay, and walked away after that, I think.
Right.
You could always have something fun you could play with, definitely.
And I agree with you in terms of the playfulness aspect. I am down for, one-legged jokes all day. And I think that when you sort of present yourself in that way, it definitely brings the temperature down in the room, so to speak, because so many people that I interact with who are, able-bodied, they are very cautious about talking, about what being an amputee is like, or, what is your prosthesis? What are you wearing? How does that work? How does that feel? And then, of course, like you mentioned, what happened? What happened to you? How did you end up this way? And it's funny because there's such an interesting spectrum of interactions that go on, whether it's someone assumes that it's just this horrible thing and you're living a horrible life, right? And we have to kind of lift them up out of that and let them know, hey, I'm okay. Everything's good. Like I have a great life. Everything's great. Yeah. I'm a really happy guy. And then there are just on the other end of that spectrum is just this sort of childlike fascination. And they are just immediately inspired by who you are or what you're doing. And they have this really kind of cool curiosity in, how do you function? And, what do you do for a living? And all of that I find is a really unique part of our experience as amputees, because there's that really interesting sort of engagement and interaction we have with people. And I enjoy that. And I find that to be an interesting part of the journey. Going from scuba and doing all of those things and getting into some of the more competitive sort of spaces. How did that sort of evolve for you from, let's say, a physical standpoint, but then also understanding how am I going to, when you look at something like CrossFit, for example, which you're very adept, getting to that level, where did your journey take you after scuba, and how did some of those things gain momentum for you in your amputee journey?
Okay, so when I was living in Thailand, I had to pay for repairs for my leg myself. There was no kind of social way of dealing with that. So when basically what I did, the best way I could deal with it was I had the cheapest foot that I could have, and I would get that. Basically, whenever it was wooden in the middle and rubber on the outside. And when it would basically fall apart, I'd order a new one from Bangkok and I'd either fix it myself, or there was a motorcycle repair shop around the corner from where I lived. And I'd go there if the bolt had rusted through and it had to be drilled out, then I'd go there and they would fix it.
What was the first visit to the motorcycle shop?
Yeah.
What was that like? I mean, you're walking in like, hey, I got something I need you to fix. I mean, what's the look on their face when you ask them that question?
I think it's so. I think it's one of the best countries to be in for that situation, because Thai people love a puzzle. They love to help a stranger.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I love that commentary. Go ahead.
And I think they found it. They took it on board as something that they would help with and somehow improve my ability. So I think they didn't even charge me the first couple of times, like for fixing my leg. And then when actually the whole thing rusted at one point, and they couldn't drill out any of the adjustment screws or bolts, so they covered the whole thing in Kevlar. And actually, it was the Kevlar that was holding my leg together rather than anything else. Obviously, I couldn't adjust it anymore, but I didn't need to. It was good enough. So
that's amazing. I hear these stories, you know, let's say from lifelong amputees that were amputees as children, and technology isn't or wasn't what it is now. And some of the stories they tell me about, you know, duct taping feet together, and I mean, literally like cobbling together their prosthesis. And I certainly, you know, I've only been an amputee for 6 years, so I go into this space of, I am so spoiled because I've never had to deal with that. I mean, the most minor squeak or, you know, imbalance or something that I experience, you know, it's like skid marks in the driveway. Like, I'm over at my prosthetist, like, you know, what are we doing with this? And why does it feel this way? And when I see, you know, amputees online sort of complaining about, you know, not getting exactly the running blade that they wanted, I'm like, you know, we're pretty lucky that even these things are available to us, because when I hear your story, you know, you're at the motorcycle repair shop. I'm like, man, what a journey.
That was definitely the thing, was like, I could get by, but what I did was I limited how much activity I did, because I was so scared about having to pay for a new foot, break it. Exactly. And I couldn't afford to. I was making enough money to live there, but I wasn't making enough money to go back to the UK and get a new leg made or something like that. Yeah. So I hardly did anything apart from the diving that I had to do, and then maybe moped on the way back to my restaurant. I had a restaurant while I was there as well. Right. And so it was as little walking as possible. So I was very, very unhealthy actually when I was there. But when I left and I moved to Sweden, then I got myself checked up. And this is where it becomes a little bit of a complicated story, because the real thing was, when I got checked up, my blood work came in, and the doctor said to me, well, how have you been dealing with hepatitis C?
You discovered you had hepatitis C, which kind of sent you on a whole other path, and you were very symptomatic as well, weren't you?
Yeah, because I knew something was wrong. I was getting really cold underwater, and it was really warm water. There was no reason for me to be cold. So really shivering underwater. And if I look back at photos of myself, my skin was a little bit yellow as well. Even the white of my eyes was a little bit yellow. So, I mean, there were warning signs, but I didn't think about it at all because I didn't know. But they looked at the genotype, and they said it was probably from South Asia. And we worked out that it's almost 100% the blood transfusion that they gave me when I lost my leg. So it'd been 20 years or something at that point, probably 15 years of living with the hepatitis C, but not knowing it. So I was drinking, I was doing a very unhealthy lifestyle, and then doing a lot of damage to my liver. So,
I was going to say, because that's really the danger zone with any form of hepatitis is liver damage.
Exactly. So the doctor said, well, either you stop drinking now, or you've probably only got about 2 years to live. And that was the sobering moment. And so, that was another point in my life where I was like, okay, I have to change something very big now. Yeah. And so it was coming to Sweden, having this news from the doctor, and then also having the healthcare opportunities in Sweden to get a much better leg than this stupid wooden Kevlar leg that I had at the time.
But you went through a lot of struggle to get your arms around the Hep C, didn't you? Wasn't there a number of different procedures that you went through in order to try to get rid of this, you know, to get it under control or get rid of it? Talk a little bit about that too, because I think that was kind of a big deal for you.
Exactly, yeah. So the first treatment was took 1 year, and that was I think it was peg interferon and ribavirin, I think it was called, ribavirin. And the combination of the two had some really strong side effects. And not everyone got them, but most people had like flu-like symptoms. But this was for like 1 year. So it was quite tough anyway. But it also gave a lot of people depression, suicidal thoughts. And for me, also a complete lack of short-term memory. I just find myself somewhere and have no idea how I got there, how long I'd been there.
Man.
And I used to have to put notes around the house just to remind myself that I'm taking a treatment. That's why I feel this way. It's not permanent. As soon as I stop taking the medication, I'll be fine. Yeah. But it was very, very tough. And luckily, I had the support of my girlfriend at the time, now my wife. But I mean, it was very, very hard for her as well.
Sure.
So the second, when it didn't work, it was heartbreaking. And then we were like, okay, we're going to do the second treatment. But the doctor said, as long as you guys are sure, because it's taken a toll on your relationship and it takes a toll on everyone's relationships. So like we really thought about it very hard, but we decided it was worth the risk. 6 more months with a different treatment. And this time they thought they'd got rid of the side effects, but unfortunately, one of the 2 drugs that they thought were causing it, they got the wrong one. So I still had this aggression, but instead of being towards other people on the second one, it was more towards myself. I was very angry with myself, and I had to lock myself in the bathroom if I got too angry. It was very difficult.
Yeah. So
then when that didn't work, there was no other treatments available at the time. So we thought, okay, well that's it. Then I'm just gonna have it and see how it goes.
Yep.
So then when the third one came, we were really not sure whether I should even do the treatment. But luckily that third one did work. It took 6 months. And so in total it was 3 years of doing that.
So you come out on the other side of this. It tests your relationship. It tests your daily life, your ability to feel to feel like you're on an even keel. You finally, after 3 rounds, you put this thing to bed, and I'm imagining suddenly you wake up. I mean, you come out of this slumber like clear, focused, determined, almost in a way I would think rediscovering yourself. Like, this is actually who I am.
Yeah.
Like I'm not that other person. Like I'm finding myself for the right in this moment. I would think that must have been so incredibly liberating for you to suddenly feel well. And then what happens,
Exactly. And that was and then what happens is how I feel about the rest of my life from that point, actually. This feeling that I have so much more energy than I ever had before. And I don't know where it's going to end. And this feeling of everything being kind of limitless. The possibilities are limitless. I remember saying at my job, I said to my boss, I said, look, I need something more to do because I don't know what to do with all this energy I have. And so it became I'd started doing training because it was a good way of dealing with the side effects from the treatments. But it was very much on your own, headphones on, really angry music on, just to get rid of some of that anger and frustration.
Sure.
But then I realized that I wanted to do something that was like maybe with other people, because I was finally not this angry person anymore, and I could remember things again, which was good. But so then I started doing these boot camps, and I thought, what's the most stupid thing I can do? And I thought, okay, an obstacle course race. There's one called Tough Viking in Sweden.
Viking, yep.
And I thought the name just made me think, okay, I have to do that.
Sure.
So then I started training towards that, talked to people who'd done it. quite a few of the amputees that I talked to on Instagram, I was asking them, how do you climb a rope, for example? That's a really tricky one if you've never tried to do it before. And I mean, trying to find someone around where I live here who is also an amputee that can climb rope, that's never going to happen. So that's when Instagram just was invaluable. So, and also amazing how kind people are with giving advice, really taking a lot of time out of their day to explain, take pictures and that sort of thing. It was amazing what people did. So I learned how to climb a rope, for example, from this one guy in Denmark. And I just went and tried it out on my own. And then I started doing some of the other things that I realized that I was missing from my training. So then I started doing the kickboxing just to do a bit of cardio. But then I thought also it was another very stupid thing to do. Like, why would I do kickboxing? But I just thought it's fun to see if I can. And yeah, it was really, really fun. In fact,
so when you were discovering, some of these new disciplines, these higher level activities, how do you feel like managing your residual limb? Like what challenges did you face? I know, very often we'll talk about high functioning people like yourself and all the things that you're doing, but sometimes we don't get into, hey, Hilton, like how do you take care of your limb? Like when you're putting yourself under that much stress, pressure, what's your skincare like? What are you doing to stay in those spaces? Because I always, for myself, a lot of getting to do a lot of the things that I'm doing now, it's always been about recovery time, being able to get out of my prosthesis and give my limb a chance to rest, and being able to measure which activities require a little bit more or a little bit less rest. Right. Because, and conversely, if I wait too long, then it's almost like my limb doesn't ever want to go back in the prosthesis again, which is bizarre. But, there's always I'm always trying to find this sort of like secret sauce, this like secret recipe to making it all work. So as far as those particular self-care kind of points, what would you say to someone that looks at your Instagram or looks at your Facebook and says, how do you get to that level? As far as management of the limb?
I think, like you say, you need to look after your rest. You need to plan. If you know that it's going to be an activity like doing squatting. Squatting, for example, is really tough on the skin on the back of my stump. Basically the edge of the prosthesis is always going to rub on those corners because you have the tendons going on either side. And I get cuts there all the time still. And no matter how much I do them, I will still get cuts there every now and again. So then you have to rest up. So I plan how often I'm going to be doing heavy squatting, for example. And I also make sure that the area is clean all the time. So every time I change my leg, because I'm lucky enough, I have two that I use. I use one for CrossFit, for example, and then I have an everyday leg. So I swap between the two. I'll use an antiseptic wipe to clean the liner and then my leg, and then the other one as soon as I finish using that one as well. I think that's really, really important. Yeah. I've learned that from mistakes of not cleaning enough. And yeah, that definitely doesn't work. The skin can really suffer if it doesn't get enough time to breathe, for example.
And so much of it, wouldn't you agree? It's like trial and error. You're saying, hey, I've made mistakes, and I've done that too, where you're just constantly kind of molding and shaping the right regimen so that you can engage the things that you enjoy doing and be relatively pain-free and without any kind of major consequence. Because when I talk to someone like yourself, the assumption of the masses is that you just make it look easy. And really, when you get, do a deeper dive into it, it becomes very obvious that, well, no, actually, there's a lot that goes into being able to do these activities. And if you're not committed to that kind of self-care and that awareness, always focusing on the limb, then you're you're probably going to struggle to get to a place that you feel like you're making a lot of progress, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because now, you're actually doing coaching, correct?
Exactly.
And tell me about all of that, because I'm fascinated by that.
I think it was just, again, you get to a place where you've been helped so much by so many different people. Like you were saying now about looking after the limb and that sort of thing. So many people told me, like, okay, this is normal to get this kind of injury at the back of my leg, the same as I was talking about before. If you don't know that, then you just think, okay, this is something bad I've done to myself. I shouldn't do this again. And you back off and you stay away. So that's when the community really jumps in. And I think when you've had that kind of help, then you want to give that help back. And so that's where the coaching definitely came in. I think everyone, okay, I'm not going to talk too much about the CrossFit because that's the stereotype, right? But I fell in love with it. And then when you fall in love that heavy, you want to kind of share and you want to make sure other people have that as well. And it was the perfect thing for me. So yeah, I definitely wanted to give that to other people. And all these little tips and things that I have from my own experiences, I want to get a chance to pass that on. And so, yeah, a little bit through Instagram at the beginning, but then I thought, okay, I have to do the actual course. And so I did the CrossFit level 1.
And tell me about the organization that you're with now. I'm looking at my notes here. What's the name?
That make the prosthesis or?
No. Who you work with when you do the coaching? Because I know.
Okay. Yeah, there's a couple of different gyms that I work with. But
okay.
One is Extreme Fabriken and the other one is Vici Athletics.
Yeah, Vici Athletics. That was the one that was on the tip of my tongue.
It's a good name, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, they've been really, really helpful with basically giving me the shifts that I need. And also one thing that was really extra nice was that they realized that 3 back-to-back course, like when I'm teaching 3 1-hour classes, I have at least half an hour on either side of it to set up and then also to clean up a little bit afterwards. And it was just too long on my leg. It was the amount of walking I was doing was just too much. So they allowed me to reduce the amount of hours that I was doing. And that was another thing that was trial and error. I didn't know it was going to be a problem. But I found I was doing, in those 3 hours of teaching, I was walking maybe 15,000 steps just in the gym, just walking around to different people.
Wow.
So yeah, it was taking this huge toll, but I didn't feel it because I was enjoying it so much. So yeah, They said, okay, take it down. We'll swap your shifts around. And they've been really great with that. So yeah, I'm very lucky with them.
Yeah. And I mean, if you were going to say, where do I want to be, let's say 5 years from now? Given everything that you've gone through, what you're doing now, as a trainer, you're definitely someone that is a major influencer in the amputee space. People are following you. They're drawing inspiration from the different activities that you're engaging. Where do you see yourself, 5 years from now?
Yeah, I think I'm hoping that I'm still competing as an athlete. I really hope so. But I'll be 53 by then, so I'll be.
Are you saying that 53 is old?
No, it's all
because you're talking to a 53-year-old right now. How dare you?
I'm not sure whether I will still be able to compete. I think especially with CrossFit, you have a window where you should be competing because you're putting your body under not normal amounts of strain. So there's a difference between competition CrossFit and everyday CrossFit. Everyday CrossFit is good for you, and it will you can do that forever, and that will make your everything better in your life.
Yeah,
that's me, the CrossFit advertiser.
Well, it's a lifestyle, wouldn't you say?
Definitely,
it's your lifestyle. Yeah,
but maybe when you become competitive, then you're pushing yourself to areas that you shouldn't be doing for very long. So maybe you should compete for a few years or 5 years, or some of the CrossFit athletes do 10 years. But you should. There's definitely a window where you should be a little bit careful. And for a lot of athletes, they will retire at 30. So yeah, I definitely one of the older ones. But at the same time, there are age groups where like it starts at 50, or it starts at 55, 60, 65, 70.
Sure.
So there's no upper range on that one. But I've already started, so my time is ticking a little bit, I think. So
when did the handstand become your thing?
I'm not sure exactly. I mean, there was definitely one point where I thought it was so silly to do. When you have all the kind of like the macho stuff that I was trying to do, and it's like, okay, after the kickboxing and the weightlifting, I'll go and do handstands for an hour, and people would laugh at me a lot. But I think that it's just the balance and everything. It's very, very important, and being able to have that core stability to be able to do the handstand, it's very, very good for you when you're the other way around as well, when you're walking on your feet as well. It's a trade-off, definitely. So
no, and a lot of people don't realize that the handstand can very much be a fitness goal. You know, because it requires a lot of strength. Obviously, it requires a lot of balance. You know, there's a lot to it, and certainly, you know, we sort of joke around because you say, oh, it's like a silly thing. To me, when I see those images, there's sort of this glow, you know, this light that comes from you, in that you're engaging your life and you're living well as an amputee. And that to me is so much a part of what we're trying to do today, what we're trying to do in terms of getting out these stories, you know, people that can provide the kind of inspiration, the kind of wisdom that the community needs right now. You know, my mission is very much to normalize what the amputee lifestyle is, to remove a lot of stigma from what we go through, and for people to see us as just incredibly powerful, and to give us all the same opportunities that everyone else has, you know, because there's really nothing that holds us back. I mean, you're a very, how I would describe, like a mild-mannered kind of person. You know, you don't have this like kind of like crazy intensity about you. But I see this very much in your social media, and so much of following you, this very, very quiet strength about you. And I really appreciate that. It's not overt in that, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's more like, hey man, I'm just doing my thing. This is what I do, you know, and this is how I perform. This is what I bring to this community. And yes, I'm proud of it. And, you know, this is just who I am. This is just my life path. And I so appreciate that. I so appreciate you being here today, taking the time, and again, hanging in there, and, you know, communicating with me so well. It's so appreciated. I can't even tell you how much independent research I have to do on guests, and for you to engage me in the way you have, I think speaks to just how kind and thoughtful you are. And I so appreciate that. Would you like to say anything to our community in closing today?
I guess the thing is, like, never be afraid to reach out to other people in the community, because sometimes you feel like when you really need help, that you're almost too ashamed to ask, or you imagine that other people are more busy than they are. And even the busiest people have been through the same thing that you're going through now. And one of the best things that we can do once it becomes easier, and once we have these experiences, to be able to share them back. And so I think nearly every amputee that I know and I talk to, they've got all the time in the world to help in any way that they can. So never be afraid to reach out, I think.
Yeah, what a great sentiment. Hey, everyone, just reach out. There are people like myself. There are people like Hilton. We are here to help. We will answer your messages. We care, you know, and again, thank you, Hilton Jones. Follow him, like him, share him. He is the man. I am Rick Bontkowski. This is the Amp'd UP211 podcast. That's going to wrap it up for us. I want to wish everyone health and happiness, and we will see you next time. Thanks.